Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Podium Couch. So today we're going to talk about the Fanatec CSL direct drive wheelbase. Now 2 years ago when I went on my little hiatus from sim racing, the CSL DD wheel was just coming out and there was a lot of hype around it, so it was really hard to get a hold of. It was in the height of COVID where literally everything was on back order anyways. And as much as I was really excited to check it out, getting an allocation wasn't that simple, and I was looking to get into some different stuff with cars, so I hadn't really had the opportunity to do that. And more recently I started researching wheels again and decided I was going to get back into sim racing, bring back the channel, which is something that I always wanted to do. And in researching, now I see there's tons of different companies that have come out with their own version of direct drive wheelbases. At the time that I had kind of taken my hiatus, I was running a Thrustmaster TSXW. Thrustmaster has since come out with their own direct drive wheel, as Logitech has as well. We got new players in the game that are coming out with DDs. It almost seems like everybody has some form of a direct drive wheelbase at this point. So with so many options out there, one of the reasons that I decided to go with the CSL DD is, despite all this competition and the fact that you could get cheaper wheelbases, and there's definitely better options out there to jump into sim racing, none of them are quite as affordable for the whole ecosystem when you got to start from the bottom. So that's why I think it's still relevant to talk about the DD wheel. But since the release of the CSL DD wheel, we've also got pedals, racing wheels, and load cell pedals, which to me is probably the most important thing for me. Is like when I get into sim racing and I want to be efficient and do well, I need my CSL load cell pedal. That was an absolute must have. But let's talk about this wheelbase. So right out of the box, the CSL DD was nothing to shake a stick at. It's very heavy. The steering shaft on it is nice and firm, locked in place. You can just tell that it's not going anywhere. It's got a metal exterior, mounting points on the sides and the bottom. In stock form, the CSL direct drive wheelbase only delivers 5 Newton meters of torque. But because it's a direct drive wheelbase and there's no belts or gears to get in the way, you get very detailed feedback. It's very consistent and very linear. You do have the option to buy a boost kit that'll take it up to 8 Newton meters of torque if you need that extra feedback. Advanced tuning options in the Fanatec app also get it to where you can really dial in the details and get the wheel to feel pretty lifelike for as low torque as it is. And despite having a decent amount of power behind it, because there's no fans or anything, the wheel is almost completely silent. So what were the overall impressions of the wheel racing with it for the first time? To be quite honest with you, I kind of felt like it was missing something. It had a little less force than the TSXW did, and it just felt light and kind of lofty. But so did the TSXW before I tuned it in. So I started playing with it a little bit and dialing it in, and I started to like it a little bit more and a little bit more after that, and eventually got to the point where it felt good, but something was still missing. It still felt a little too smooth. I didn't feel like I was getting the feedback. And then I switched tracks. Let me tell you, one lap around on the Nürburgring with that wheel, and you realize the difference between a belt drive and a direct drive wheelbase. The amount of detail that comes through that wheel is absolutely incredible. That being said, I do still feel like I would like a little more force, but that's the wonderful thing about the CSL DD. You can buy a boost kit, and I'm definitely looking forward to the boost kit. Alright, so now let's talk about the CSL wheel. To be honest with you, I didn't expect much from this wheel for being $120 and it being the cheapest wheel on Fanatec's website. But when it showed up, I was pretty surprised by the thickness, and the overall quality of the wheel was pretty good. Now the basic CSL steering wheel does come in a realistic size, 300 millimeters. It's got a rubberized exterior. The paddles are snap dome activated. They've got a good click feeling to them, and there's plenty of buttons on the wheel, which make it really convenient when you're racing to have your quick talk options and stuff like that. Doesn't eliminate the need for a button box in the long term, but it definitely is nice to have a few buttons at the disposal when you're using it. Would it be my end-all be-all or my first pick for a wheel? Absolutely not. I actually really miss my Alcantara. It does feel a little foamy and a little bit cheap after playing with it for a bit, but to get you started, I was fairly impressed with it. The shifts on it are nice and smooth. It clicks well. Not a lot I can say for it because it doesn't have a lot of bells and whistles. The little LED light on top absolutely drove me nuts until I figured out how to shut that down because, yeah, just that constant flashing, I don't understand it. And on the wheel, it just kind of goes crazy. There's not like a good rhyme or reason to it. Like, hey, it just lights up when you need to shift. It like blinks 12 different colors constantly. So that I did feel like was kind of annoying. But overall, for being a cheap wheel, I think it feels pretty good. And of course, my initial impressions of the CSL DD Ecosystem wouldn't be complete without talking about the pedals. I have to admit, I wasn't very excited about the load cell pedal the first time I used this thing. To be honest with you, I was quite disappointed. Reason being is it just doesn't have any movement to it. You can feel the pressure you're applying, but it almost feels like you're applying it to a plate. Like it doesn't have any squish. And I mean, you don't want a lot, but you want to know you're moving a brake pedal. Like in a real car, when you push the pedal, you feel it move a little bit. This feels like there's just so much tension on it. That being said, I have found myself to be a bit more efficient with it. Even though I'm not a huge fan of how it feels to drive with it, it definitely is effective and is great from a pressure sensitivity standpoint. And right out the gate, the clutch and the gas pedal, they felt pretty good. No complaints there. I would like to have had a little more resistance slash, I don't know, feel in the gas pedal that just isn't there. It's kind of hard to describe, but it's not necessary. And I think the pedal works just fine. I'm able to feather it and do exactly what I need to with it. It has just enough resistance to keep it right up against my foot and not feel squishy or like not usable. But definitely would have liked a little bit more resistance on it. The base model of the pedals comes in with just a brake and a throttle on it. Both made of metal construction, very firm, very solid. For an $80 set of pedals, I almost feel like you can't beat it. There's a little bit of a feel factor that I mentioned earlier, but at the same time, considering what you're paying for it, you're definitely getting good bang for the buck on these pedals. The load cell pedal is a bit of an upgrade. I want to say that was about $140 or so. So definitely expect to pay on that end of it. But like I said, the load cell pedal is absolutely essential. It does have a bit too much firmness to it for my liking, but at the same time I've found it to be quite effective. The overall strength and durability and the adjustability of these pedals, even at a price of $240 or $250, it's definitely a solid pedal set. I would highly recommend it for if you're just starting out, and with the load cell upgrade and everything, you do have the option to go USB, so it is compatible with other racing wheels. Alright guys, so I did want to keep this video a little bit brief because I'm not giving my full review. This is kind of just the initial things I experienced, and to be honest with you, when I started out with it, I was a little underwhelmed for the videos I had watched and how I felt about it, but after spending some time on it, definitely feel some efficiency from it. It's more lifelike than a belt-driven wheel, so definitely worth the upgrade there, especially considering coming from a TSXW with TLCM pedals where, you know, I had load cell, I had more force feedback than the current wheel does. I do feel the realism just a little bit more, and like I said, I'm really looking forward to the boost kit. But let me go ahead and leave you guys with one final lap, and I will see you next week when I talk about the most important things that I feel like you need to have when you get into sim racing to be consistent on the track. We're going green. If I had to sum up my thoughts on the CSL ecosystem, I would say if you're looking to get into sim racing with a decent level of realism, it's probably the best bang for the buck you're gonna find. I think the direct drive wheelbase gives more realism than the belt drive that would be roughly around the same price. So I think it was an awesome addition to the Fanatec family. It's something that new racers coming into sim racing should definitely check out and consider. There are a few other options competing with it. They may have better reviews and things like that, and I think ultimately the thing I like about the Fanatec system is just that there's so much compatibility within it, and it gives you a lot of room to grow within the ecosystem. Fanatec offers a great selection of wheels that fits into the needs. One thing I will say that I didn't mention previously that I wish Fanatec would do is they do not offer a shaft extension, which would make things a little bit easier on setup. I would like to have the option to move the wheelbase further back, and that's just from a realism perspective, to be as realistic as possible in the cockpit. I think most people just appreciate sim racing for what it is. Me, I just want a little more of a realistic feel. So if I could get that shaft extension like many of the other wheelbases offer, I think that would be a great addition for Fanatec, and that's something I would like to see them add.